bring in now Jason Whitlock at Whitlock Jason on Twitter, my business partner at Outkick. Jason, you and I were out to dinner last night, so we've talked a decent amount about this. Big picture here. Let's start big picture. How big of a story is this in the American sports landscape in your mind? You have covered sports for 30 some odd years as a journalist. Contextualize this for me.
As we talked last night at dinner, and I wasn't able to come up with a better example or better marking point, this is the most historic day in American sports since, I think, the bombing at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. I think this will have deeper ramifications because I think that American sports will be dramatically changed, and I think that NBA and perhaps the NFL will be diminished moving forward. I think the perception of athletes moving forward with the great mass of American people, their perception of the athletes will be diminished. Look, in some people's minds, their profile will be elevated. But I think that overall, the respect, the reverence of football and basketball players and just athletes in general will take a hit here. And that's not me choosing a side on whether I think what they've done is right or wrong. That's just me evaluating how it will be perceived. However, I think the NBA players have made a mistake. I'm sitting here writing a column. This has been a very tough column to write, to put this thing all in context. It's so historic, it's so big, and there's so many moving parts to it. But I just think where I end up landing on this, and I watched Chris Webber was celebrated last night on TNT for his commentary. It was very emotional commentary, a 3-minute deal. I think people should watch. It's been put out over social media. But he basically championed the fact that the players didn't have a plan. He doesn't have a plan. And, they should ignore anybody that criticizes them for not having a plan. And so it just made me think of the Nike slogan, "Just do it." And that came out in 1988, and it's been the most powerful thing that I think has infected sports over the last 30, 40 years, is this whole just do it mentality. You don't need to be strategic. You don't need to have a plan. Just do it. And Kaepernick just did it in August of 2016, sat on a bench, had no plan, has never articulated a strategy or a formula for how we correct racial oppression. He just did it. And 4 years later, the Milwaukee Bucks, they just did it. And, and inside the little NBA bubble, they're going to be celebrated. But if you really want to affect change, you need a plan and a strategy. You just don't do it. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, that wasn't just doing it. There was a whole strategy and plan, and there was a list of demands, and they had a course of action they thought would improve things. There is no course of action. There's just emotion and people just doing things. And it's a reflection of just where sports have gone, where athletes have gone, what moves them, what athletic culture is. You don't need a plan. You just need emotion.
Last night at dinner, you said something I thought was interesting, and I hope this is part of your column as well, that baseball used to be America's pastime. And baseball is still majority white sport in some way, right? I know there's a lot of Hispanic players and there's minority players and everything else and people who play from other countries. But it has been surpassed, baseball has, by the NFL certainly, which is a majority black league, and by, at least on a national level, I know baseball can win locally in attendance, and it gets into an interesting argument, but the NBA as well, which is a majority black league also. And so much of the story of American sports, if you want to say, from basically 1980, let's use 1980 as a line of demarcation because that's around the time that Magic and Larry started to lift up the NBA. has been the story of black athletes and their sports becoming more popular while a majority white sport like baseball declined. And you said, and I thought it was an interesting point, that much of that was about trying to appeal to the larger society, right? It was Michael Jordan, be like Mike, everybody building to try to speak to everyone. And then the analogy I made in our conversation was now everything's like cable, right? Michael Jordan was the Cosby Show. And interestingly, so was Barack Obama's presidential campaign, right? It was about appealing to the largest possible audience you could get. Oprah Winfrey you could put into that mix. The triumph of the ability of black culture, Will Smith in movies, to speak to everyone. And now we're back to a niche, and like the NBA and many other sports now outside of the NFL, at least so far, have become niche, and they're trying to speak to a smaller crowd as opposed to trying to speak to everyone. Does that make sense? I mean, I think it's a big idea, but that was one of the discussions that we were having last night, and I thought it was kind of fascinating.
Well, for me, having been a former college athlete and obviously involved in sports throughout my entire 30-year career as a sports writer and broadcaster, it's been an amazing journey for the black athlete, and we can't underestimate the role American sports play in American culture. I'm not sure if anything has been more powerful in shaping American culture over the last 100 years than sports. And so to see us climb that mountain and sit on the throne, football is at the very top of the American sports culture, strongest pop culture force we have going, number one show on 5 TV networks, 75% of the players are black. It took a long time to get there, a lot of strategy, a lot of planning to get there, and here we are. And NBA, same thing, how they've risen. Clay, when I was a kid in the 70s, the NBA was one of the most disrespected leagues in all of sports. No one, took them seriously, felt like the league was full of guys high on cocaine. If you remember the Michael Jordan 30 for 30 documentary, he talked about joining the Bulls. And to see them elevate to where they have, and I'm not sure if these guys respect that journey. I'm not sure if they fully appreciate and respect the power that gives them and the amount of money and what they could do with that money by protecting that protected space where they're at. They want to involve themselves in gestures that will make them very popular over social media, but I don't think it will affect any change. And that was one, Chris Webber's a guy I've known since he was 18, 19-year-old kid at Michigan. I covered the Fab Five Michigan basketball teams. And, he's a bright athlete. But I was listening to him last night explain on TNT how they don't need a plan. All they just raise awareness. Don't listen to anybody that says you're making a mistake. And I was like, this is the blind leading the blind. And they don't want to listen to anybody that's like, hey, how about pooling your resources? I mean, you're down there in a bubble. You obviously are just sitting around talking about what you can do to affect change. And the best you can come up with is walking off your job. When these are a group of millionaires, LeBron James is probably worth $500 million. There's a bunch of these. They got shoe contracts and all this other stuff. These are some of the richest people in the world. Are they billionaires? No, but again, they're in a very small select group. If they pool their resources in banks and things like that, they could develop some of these black communities, inner city neighborhoods. They could invest in them in a real way, not with gestures, walking off, finances, building businesses, employing people. As I said last night, one of the great things that I take a lot of pride in is like when I acquire power, I use it to help black people. I if you go just look at the show that I put together for FS1, Speak for Yourself, Marcellus Wiley, Uncle Jimmy. My Uncle Jimmy was a guy, is my best friend from Kansas City, a guy that was working in the jail in Kansas City, Kansas, as a deputy sheriff or a sergeant in the sheriff's department or whatever, that I brought onto a television show to play a role as my uncle. Darnell Smith, a kid from my high school, a kid that played football at my college, brought him on TV. One of the first things we did when I got to Outkick, hey, Gary Sheffield's son, Gary Sheffield Jr., let's bring him over to Outkick and let's train him up as a writer. I just want these athletes, and this is me, I don't have the wealth of a LeBron James or a lot of these athletes. They have, and again, LeBron's doing some things with Uninterrupted and things like that. He's in, but they can go to these communities with their great wealth, with their pooled resources, and make a huge impact on the lives of black people in those communities. These gestures, I just don't, and Chris Webber said it, he goes, yeah, we know nothing's going to change, but just do it, basically, was what he was saying. It just so bothered me. They need a plan. They need a game plan and a real strategy. Just walking off your job and raising awareness, that's just not good enough. It's a joke.
Here's the big problem that I have in terms of the decision-making. They are partners with the NBA, right? The players are. They get around 50% of all the revenue that is produced. The owners get the other half. And so when they decide to boycott or strike or protest or however you want to classify what they are doing, ultimately they are attacking their own business in a negative way. Moreover, most strikes, protests, whatever they are, require, and this goes to your point about the just do it and the lack of planning, require an actionable intent. Let me just give people out there an example of what I'm talking about. If you are a member of a union and you work, as I know your mom used to be a member of a union, I think, back in the day. If your mom back in the day or anybody else out there who's ever been a member of a union, if you strike or you are locked out or whatever else, your feud is with your employer and you are seeking some additional type of compensation in some way, form, or fashion from your employer. In other words, that is a conflict between management and employee. Here, the management, the NBA, Adam Silver, the owners, they have bent over backwards to do whatever the players want, even if it's in the worst interest of the business. Let me give you examples. Black Lives Matter is written on the basketball court. I don't know that that in any way helps the NBA. Players are contractually obligated to stand for the national anthem as a part of the contracts that they signed. The NBA said, we're not going to be enforcing that provision. Everybody's allowed to kneel. Also, wildly, the jerseys themselves have social justice warrior slogans on them. Players wanted that. All three of those actions are literally unprecedented in the history of the NBA. And Jason Whitlock, it was not enough. The players still walked out of their jobs. My question from a pure structural perspective, what do they want the NBA to do that the NBA already hasn't done? To me, if I'm a business owner, this is just an example of you can't ever be woke enough, even with all the things the NBA did to disrupt decades of precedent. The players still weren't willing to show up and work. That, to me, is the biggest story here. There's no way that the NBA doesn't decide whether charges are brought in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The NBA doesn't have any relationship whatsoever with the investigation going on there, nor should they. If a sports league suddenly is weighing in on an independent investigation, criminal investigation that is going on, that's insanely inappropriate because most people have only seen a 20-second video They don't even know what exactly happened in this case, which goes to while we were eating dinner, suddenly the news story breaks, oh, this guy was armed with a knife, and suddenly there's all sorts of questions being raised now about whether there are even any charges that are going to be filed.
Clay, the mindset of the players is not that they are at war with ownership. That's not who they're striking out against. And I'm trying to say this respectfully because I do have some sympathy for the athletes. I would hate to be young, full of free time, with a bunch of money, and have a smartphone in my pocket, because I really believe the brains of the athletes have been hacked. And it's not just the athletes. It's a great portion of America. Brains have been hacked by these smartphones and these social media apps, and they're being led around by their nose. But what you're looking at, and I'm sorry for having to be this honest, but there's an arrogance and a self-delusion here that's driving the actions of the players. And so what they really think they're doing is they're punishing America. We're taking away your right to enjoy us play basketball. And so that is the action they're taking. This is punishment for the people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the Attorney General of the state of Wisconsin, the police in Wisconsin, and police all over America. They're being punished because we're taking away your right to enjoy us play basketball. This is driven by a delusion and an arrogance that's unprecedented, and again, but it's kind of understandable. If you sit on a social media app and get retweets and likes, and you're addicted to that, and you have millions of dollars in your pocket, and you exist inside a bubble, and these basketball players actually are inside a bubble where everybody thinks like them, everybody's repeating the same thing. Oh, how horrible America is, and look this one incident in Wisconsin, or what we saw in Minneapolis with George Floyd, or these isolated incidents, they speak for America. I mean, listen, I like and respect Doc Rivers. He's got to get up out of this bubble, because to get on TV and to act like what happened in Minneapolis or what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin, is proof that America doesn't love you back. Because that was his argument. We love America, and America just doesn't love us back. All because a cop got in an argument with a guy that wanted on arrest for sexual assault. The cops and Jacob Blake, who was wanted, had an open warrant for a sexual assault. They have a dispute. They wrestle to the ground. He gets up, escapes, walks over to the other side of his car. Apparently, according to the Department of Justice, admits to having a knife. This is because that cop and Jacob Blake got in a dispute. That's proof that America doesn't love black people. I think it's proof that if you wrestle and fight with the cops, things can spin completely out of control. That's all it's proof of. And look, the cop may have done something criminal, and when the investigation is complete, they may charge him. He may be wrong. It's just proof, though, that if situations between an armed person who's been licensed by the government to use deadly force gets in an argument, a fight, a scuffle with a resisting person with a criminal record who has a warrant for his arrest, it can spin out of control. It doesn't say anything about what America thinks about me. And I can point to examples of the great things that have happened in America for black people. Is that not proof of, when we think about and look, the Civil War was fought for a variety of reasons, but a big one was the ending of slavery. Hundreds of thousands of Americans sacrificed their lives. Hundreds of thousands of Americans sacrificed their lives to end slavery. We have I don't know. What are they going, 30, 40 instances over the last 7, 8 years of police perhaps arguably doing something inappropriate? But those 30 or 40 police speak louder than the people that made a lot of sacrifices to end slavery, a lot of sacrifices to end segregation and Jim Crow. We just got to stop this. And this expectation that every white person must love us in order for us to feel loved by America or to be happy. That's a standard that will never be met, and you will always be miserable.
Jason Whitlock with us now at Whitlock Jason. You can go read his column, which will be up soon this morning on Outkick. Jason, you said a lot of interesting things in the last segment, but one of them that I think is really important here is NBA players have an outsized sense of how much people care about whether they play basketball. And I say that in this context. If the NBA just abandons the bubble, people will go watch baseball, they'll go watch hockey, they'll get ready for college football if it comes back, which I hope it will. They'll watch the NFL, they'll go watch Netflix, they'll go watch Amazon Prime, they'll go watch Disney Plus. If anything, 5 months without the NBA existing taught a lot of people that they're fine without basketball in their lives. Why do you think that NBA players believe that by not playing, they're going to provoke some sort of massive uproar where people are like begging them, oh my God, you have to play or else? No, most people are just going to shrug their shoulders. They're really only upsetting the most diehard of NBA fans, and the most diehard of NBA fans probably already agree with them on everything in the first place.
If we're going to have an honest discussion, we got to put all the cards on the table. And at the end of the day, all of this is politics, man. It is all politics. It's all Trump. It's Donald Trump. The whole country, everything we've experienced the last 6, 7 months, everything. The shutdown of our economy, everything. The overreaction to instant reaction. Jacob Blake, I saw a 20-second video. I have to respond. It's all Donald Trump. People think the greatest thing they can do to get Donald Trump out of office is to shut down things. If people don't work, let's shut down the economy. Nothing will be normal until Donald Trump is out of office. That's the movement the players are caught up in. LeBron James' whole more than a vote thing, and again, why he wouldn't get off social media during his playoff run when he always has. This election is, clearly to me, the polling must not be going well for the resistance, and they just keep getting more and more desperate. And so if you're down in that NBA bubble, that might as well be the Democratic convention. LeBron James is the chairman of the NBA's Democratic Party, and they're just doing anything they can to make people miserable in their mind and to make the country seem to be in total chaos. And it's all Donald Trump's fault. And if we just get Donald Trump out of office, America will be good again. And so this is their Make America Great Again plan, shut down everything, accuse everybody of racism. And Clay, I say this, and I say it all the time. I don't vote. I don't participate in politics. I really am not a political partisan. I am, however, embarrassed and bothered by the lengths the Democratic Party seems to be going to, the lives, the economy, the creation of poverty, which will kill more people. The lengths they're willing to go through to get this president out of office, they don't care who gets harmed by it. And what's going on in the NBA is just a reflection of that mentality.
All right, let me follow you down that political rabbit hole. If that's true, we talk a lot, you're a chess player. If that's true, isn't the NBA and their actions actually helping Donald Trump? In other words, I don't think there's anybody out there that is being converted to the Democratic side, right? They're the NBA Democratic side, if that's true. They're preaching to a choir that mostly already agrees with them. And by the way, that choir ain't as big as it used to be, right? This is a church, the NBA church, that has a declining membership because already this year, Black Lives Matter on the court, social justice warrior slogans on the jerseys, kneeling for the anthem. The NBA ratings have been plummeting, okay? So already they are speaking to a dwindling audience. Doesn't this make their audience even smaller and also work, ironically enough, in the advantage of the person that is driving them insane, Donald Trump?
I think it's working to his advantage, and I've always said that from the very beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, that really it's having the opposite impact. It's increasing support for Donald Trump, and I believe that continues to be the case. I think that a lot of Americans are looking around at the civil unrest, buildings burning down, the rioting, the looting on a nightly basis, and saying, is this what we want our country to be? And who is supporting these people? And it seems to be all the people on the left sitting on TV with these claims of mostly peaceful riots or peaceful protesters, with just a handful of people that are burning down buildings and looting. It's just a small minority of people. I just think most people just aren't buying that narrative, and just look at the chaos and just say, if we really go this route, the Democratic route, aren't we just going to see more of this? Are these the people we want to turn the country over to? I just think a lot of Americans are rejecting that, and I thought on CNN some people talking about the polling numbers, and that it's starting to be reflected in the polls that Donald Trump is getting stronger. So I tend to think it's backfiring, but people a lot of times they commit to a strategy and they don't know how to get out of it. And I think civil unrest and chaos and the destruction of the country has been their strategy, and they don't know how to backpedal out of it.
Well, that's a good point now, because it raises the larger issue that I talked about to start the show. I don't know how the NBA players go back to work now, okay? I don't know what's going to happen in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but if this individual, Jacob Blake, if he was truly armed with a knife, it makes charges more difficult to file. Certainly, we're not necessarily going to see a trial for some time. I don't know how the NBA just suddenly comes back to work having walked out already. And I don't know what your thought process would be on this, but how do they go back having claimed that they've changed anything at all and not have people just be like, well, that was pointless. Like, you walked out and didn't show up to play on Wednesday, and now you're going to play on Saturday instead? Like, what did you actually prove other than, you're right, I guess, you don't have to play basketball. I mean, everybody has a choice whether to play a sport or not. I don't know how they come back and don't look ridiculous coming back, because I don't see anything substantially changing because they walked off the court. Does that make sense? I don't know how they come back and any rational person can be like, oh, they made a big point here.
At some point, I don't know when, maybe it won't be until next season, but at some point there will be a rebellious, outspoken black athlete in the NBA or in the NBA or in the NFL that will take this on and play the other side. I don't think the majority of NBA players agreed with what happened yesterday. I think there was some disagreement in the room. And I think there's going to be some guys eventually that will man up and say, hey, what are we really doing here? And or maybe somebody will actually come up with a strategy and say, hey, wouldn't we be better off protecting our league, protecting the money we're making, and use that money to support the causes we believe in rather than these gestures? I think at some point someone's going to rise up, but that may not be till next year. But that may be the end point, is when someone with a pair stands up inside that bubble and says, hey, this is crazy. We made a lot of sacrifices coming down here to play these games and to support our league, and do we really just throw this away on a gesture that's not going to do anything? Someone's going to ask that question.
Larry Bird and Magic Johnson made the NBA matter. Michael Jordan took it to stratospheric heights, the likes of which we haven't ever accomplished or even gotten near since. 50% of the NBA's audience has vanished since Jordan retired. Now LeBron James is the face of the NBA. What's his legacy? What does he want? Do you believe that he will actually leave the bubble, or is he so desperate to win a championship that he's just trying to posture here? What does LeBron want? What happens?
I'm not 1,000% sure, so this is a bit of speculation. But look, they're up, 3-1 on Portland. I don't think they're playing all that well, though, and so LeBron may realize that they're not good enough inside the bubble to win a title, and maybe he does want out. Again, LeBron is so tied in politically that maybe things are so desperate for, the Biden-Harris and the Democratic Party that he really does want to leave and shut down the NBA. Because, look, I think LeBron is the king of that arrogance and delusion that I was talking about, that denying people the right to see him play basketball is an amazing punishment for the American public. And so I think he kind of buys into that and is probably the leader of that group of people that think, man, I'm going to make America cry and miserable. I'm not going to play hoops. I think he kind of wants to leave and end this.
What's Adam Silver thinking? They're going to have an owners meeting. Again, if I'm an owner and I'm sitting back, or a governor, as the NBA calls them, if I am one of the owners of the league, right, one of the team owners, one of the franchise owners, I'm looking around saying, man, we wrote Black Lives Matter on the court. We've committed $300 million to social justice causes. We have allowed players to have messages on their jerseys supporting political activism, unheard of. We also are allowing players to kneel for the national anthem, which is directly contradicted by the contracts that they signed, and we're giving no punishment whatsoever. We now have allowed players to walk out of actual games that are scheduled for our television partners that we are contractually obligated to produce, and we haven't punished any players for doing that either. I don't know how much more owners and Adam Silver and everybody else can bend here. What can they even do? Like, if you're an owner right now, or you're advising an owner, or you are Adam Silver, what do you say? What can they do? How does this end?
I think Adam Silver's number one thought, and Roger Goodell's number one thought, is survival. How do I protect this paycheck? How do I survive in this job? And the players have so much control, and they're so afraid of the players that they're just going to come up with new ways to acquiesce and to pacify the players. And it's not at all, the business just doesn't matter. We've had this discussion, Clay. These guys are making decisions on how to protect their own job status. It's not about protecting the NBA. And so the solutions here for ownership are, you're going to have to find strong, legitimate leadership. They don't have it right now. In NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, there's no strong leadership. And there's no one willing to stand up to the players. There's no one that feels like they're qualified to debate these guys on these racial issues. They've got the wrong leadership in place, and so they're going to be bending over and bending over and bending over. And look, the NFL, I think Pete Carroll just said NFL games may get canceled as part of protest, because if someone gets shot and it's caught on video during football season, NFL players will do the exact same thing. Because this started with the Detroit Lions skipping practice. And so NFL games may get canceled over the exact same thing. The NFL, the NBA, all these sports leagues need to find legitimate, strong leadership willing to stand up to the players. The players are just in this just do it mentality. They don't care about consequences. They don't care about solutions. They care about doing things that feel good and allegedly raise awareness, which is really just raise my Twitter following or Instagram following. It's at some point you're going to have to pick legitimate leadership.
Good stuff. I encourage you to go read Jason Whitlock's column at Outkick. Go subscribe for the VIP and download and listen to this entire show if you only heard a few minutes of it. It'll make you smarter. It is the smartest discussion you will hear on NBA issues anywhere in sports media or media in general. Thanks for listening to Outkick. I'm Clay Travis.